Okay, welcome everyone to Ask Me Anything. For those who don't know me, I'm John Hetherington and wanted to share a Ask Me Anything on technology projects because I'm getting asked a lot of these questions over the years around how to implement technology, how to pick the right team, how to select the right technology. So the point of today is to just answer some of your questions. So just monitoring the chat here just to see the questions coming in. Yeah, 1 second, just seeing where with a few of the joiners there. Hope it's good weather with you all. It's chilly here, broadcasting from Calgary. It's -6 Celsius, but feels a lot colder because we've just had a load of snow again last night. So it's supposed to be March and spring, but more snow. But hopefully it's clearing up this week. And just before we get started, interesting fact again, it's actually March 14th today, which is 3/14. And for anyone who doesn't know that, it's National Pi Day, Pi the calculation day. So interestingly that we have a Pi celebration today. And oddly enough, it's also Albert Einstein's birthday as well. No coincidence there, but he actually had his birthday on March 14th as well. So fun fact for you. Okay, so first question in there from Ben Nicholson. Yeah, thanks, Ben, for commenting there, a question there. So what do you think are the best use cases for ChatGPT? So this is interesting. I love ChatGPT. I love the topic of AI and how it can help our businesses and personal lives. So let's break that down into use cases. So I'm going to cover the use case around business because that's the main one. So personally, I use ChatGPT a lot to do a range of things, including research on technology projects, technologies. I also use it to help craft some of my social media, some of my video scripts. I even use it to craft some of my emails. I'll put a draft email in and say, make this more conversational. Some communications to my team. I recently did a communication introducing a new project manager. So I said, help me craft a message to my team introducing the project manager. So the trick for ChatGPT is how good you are at asking the questions. So this is really, really important because at the end of the day, technology, like any AI, is a tool, and how you ask the questions gets better results. So what I found is that you need to position your question in terms of who you are, what you need it for, and the style of what you want to come back. So for example, the who you are is as a project manager or program manager of a technology project is the who. What the context, so it's a large, complex technology project, and the style is conversational, recognizing good work to date, relaxed, upbeat. So putting in those, what you need, who you are, and the context is really, really important with ChatGPT and other AI tools as well. So that's the first use case around just helping it be more productive. The second use case I'd say is then you're also looking at more private use of ChatGPT and also AI, which is a future state. I think that's part of the paid package they're looking to bring out shortly, is where you'd apply ChatGPT to your own business data. So you'd actually create a private environment of ChatGPT looking at your ERP data or business data. And then you could ask it questions on your business data to say, for example, if you looked at your financial accounting system data, what's the cash flow forecasting over the next 5 years in comparison to other companies? So it would do some research, but then return you a private answer in your own ecosystem. So that's another interesting use case, which I've not seen in practice yet, but I'm seeing people start to talk about that and start to build that out. So that's another very specific use of ChatGPT and AI going forward as well. So yeah, it was interesting. I found I was thinking about how students would use ChatGPT and the challenge that teachers have around students crafting or creating their essays in ChatGPT. And at the end of the day, my point of view on this is that if I'm a teacher, I would say go for it. Use ChatGPT because it's another tool to help us do better work. as a teacher, I'm still going to judge and still rate and rank and mark your essays. But if you're using ChatGPT, that's up to you. It'd be a case of, I'm going to rate the quality of that essay, even if, however it's used. So if you're really good at writing, then using ChatGPT is only going to help that. So no problem, Ben. What I'll do next, I'm actually going to jump to another question. I'm just seeing other questions come in here as well. We're actually broadcasting a couple of streams here, actually going out to YouTube as well. So let me just change this slide over as well. So just while we're gathering some of them, I'm just going through the questions here as well. Just while we're gathering that, I want to just show you a quick chart here as well. This I find this really interesting, actually. Let me zoom in there so we can see it. So this is from a finance research for accountants, but I actually find it applies to many industries and many experts in technology. So this is what leaders are looking for. It was a survey by Adaptive Insights, and they were asking what's most important right now. This was a recent research for those leaders. And interestingly enough, it's not about specific skills, although Excel skills here, competency in modeling around the finance team is important. The key ones around adapting to new technologies. And that's why I'm spending a lot of time on this topic, because adapting to new technologies is absolutely key now, because it's coming at us so fast and quickly. And the change is so much more important than the technology itself. And what I'm going to do next in another couple of questions, I'm actually going to talk you through a process or a framework for how do you pick the right technology, because I know sometimes that's a challenge, is how to approach the picking of technology, because you get overwhelmed with choices. And then interesting, just in that, let me just zoom in there as well. The collaboration and communication skills. I find that's very, very important, especially as we talk about ChatGPT and AI. I'm often asked, what skills or what's the future of accountants, project managers, developers, given that AI is starting to take over a lot of our work? What do we as project managers do going forward? What do we as accountants, finance leaders, and IT leaders do going forward? So this collaboration, communication skill is absolutely key. So if you look at the skills you need going forward, anything investing in critical thinking, communication styles, storytelling. So ChatGPT is going to give us the data, but you need to convey that story across to your leaders and customers and clients. So presentation skills, collaboration is mentioned there, critical thinking, problem solving, using the tools in the right way, and also just good project management, but more importantly, engagement of your team and stakeholder management as well, like building relationships and team building. It's going to be absolutely key going forward. Just looking down the chart there, is there anything else I want to pull out of that one? So let's move on, actually, because I want to show you another chart here as well, which is really interesting around how we're using how the challenge around technology. So this is a chart. Let me zoom in here as well. This is a chart I did a survey and created a chart based on responses to what are the challenges you're facing right now. So how do I pick the right technology became the number one question, which is why I'm going to go through that in a bit more detail in a second. But getting value from technology, best practice implementation, high up there. People are just very busy. They're overwhelmed with choice. There's a lot of vendors out there, a lot of options for using technology. Getting most from your tech vendors, and then upgrading your ERP or accounting system. Like, how do we know it's fit for purpose? How do we know it's giving you what you need? And then the grey box is there as well. The day-to-day grind we're all going through. And I will actually talk to some productivity. Perhaps next week, actually, we'll do a section on productivity at the next Ask Me Anything on Tuesday next week. But we'll talk about competing priorities. How do we get new skills on the team, or acquire and also retain? And then integrating, that one in the top right there. How do we integrate data in them? How do we integrate all the systems together? Because we've got more data, more systems coming at us. So how do we make sure this all comes together and works properly? what I'm going to do now, let's actually go into that in a bit more detail. So that first, one of the questions that was sent to me in advance was, what are the best technologies out there? What are the technologies that offer the best opportunities right now? And I would always start with automation and AI. So as Ben mentioned earlier, using ChatGPT personally is, for your own business and your own working, is always going to help. The other thing is automation. Because, and when I say automation, I'm not necessarily, it doesn't mean technology, although technology is a part of the automation. The first thing around automation is just getting your standards, your procedures together. Getting a checklist is automation, because you want to reduce any manual variance, anything that's repetitive. That's a checklist or process. And as soon as you have that checklist or process, that means you can then repeat it, which means you're automating it, and that saves time. So I want to make sure people realize that the automation doesn't mean we have to suddenly go and buy technology. In fact, technology is the second or third step in the process, which I'll show you in a second. When you're automating something, you first look at the process. What's manual? What's repetitive? Maybe you're pulling data into a spreadsheet on a regular basis. Maybe you're onboarding people, and it's a repetitive process. So how can we streamline that? How can we make a checklist to then make sure we go through the same process every time? And then once you have that repetitive process, that's when you can ultimately get into technology. But that's at a later stage. So just automation of standard operating procedures is going to save you a lot of time. So let's talk about the framework here, because I always want to leave you folks with steps, actions, things you can take away and use straight away. So I often get asked, how do I pick the right technology? So always starts with know your targets. So what do you want to achieve? And I can't stress this enough, folks, because knowing what you want to achieve, your goals, will decide that your critical path, it'll be your fastest way to getting a return on investment on any project or technology. So the goals could be reducing cost in the invoice processing system, could be reducing time spent entering data into the accounting system or into the service, into the ticketing system. Either way, what's the goal? Is it growth of the company? Do we want to expand into new markets? Do we want to get more clients? Do we want to increase sales revenue? Is it making people more efficient? Is freeing up their time from day-to-day manual tasks so they can spend time on strategic work? Be very clear on the goal, the targets. And then the second step, again, we're not talking about technology yet. We're talking about brainstorming with your team. So again, I always love doing this first, because people who are doing the work typically know where the problems are. They may have micro sight of what's going on, and sometimes you need to take that outside and just look at the bigger picture, but always start with getting input from your team. I like using surveys. I like using brainstorming sessions where we just get everyone together for just an hour and say, let's just walk through the process. What doesn't work here? Maybe that ticket or that piece of data or that report for approval doesn't get assigned to someone quickly. So could we speed that up? How can we make sure people get that report quicker? Anyway, get your team's input, because they're the ones who probably know it best. Then, again, we haven't got to technology yet. Then you get to the list of must-haves. So what must you fix? What must we do? What must we achieve? Again, going back to the goals, the targets are the first, because then you get to how you pick vendors, which is on the next step. So number 3 is, what must we get out of this? What are the requirements that we want to do for a new technology or a new solution? Then you take this list and reach out to vendors and shortlist them. So this is a combination of internet research and sometimes going out to friends in the industry. What else have they used? Looking at what other people are doing in their other companies. But either way, get to a shortlist of 2 or 3 vendors who you can then evaluate, just to say, okay, does this make sense based on what we want for that system and that solution? So you haven't incurred any cost really yet. Haven't spent anything. This is around, other than time, this is around getting to that shortlist. Then the next important point there is you pilot. So this is where, again, should be free for a lot of vendors. You do a free pilot and you evaluate them. Maybe it could be as a formal as a request for proposal or a request of information. But even if you're a smaller company and you just want to make some inquiries, you can reach out to this shortlisted vendor list and say, here's what we'd like to achieve. How have you done this with other companies? How do you achieve this requirement for speeding up the data processing? And a pro tip, also ask your vendors what they would do to improve your process, because they've done this many, many times. So ask them the same question back to say, hey, this is what we want. This is what we're planning to do with this reporting process or the onboarding process or whatever it is you're looking to do, land management or refining the data for sales. Ask the vendor how they would improve this process. And that often gives some good insights. So in summary, this is just the 5 key steps. But if you're picking, how do you pick the right technology? And how do you know which technology is going to give the most value? It's by knowing the targets first. So these 5 steps, this is part of a much bigger technology evaluation framework, which I go through with my clients. But I wanted to share this with you because you can take it away and just make sure you go through these steps when you're thinking about your next technology, just to make sure you don't get overwhelmed with choices. This helps narrow it down. So I'm just going to go back to the chat, see how much, see if there are any questions come through. So seeing a few people come in from different parts of the country and North America, which is cool. Okay, a few people coming in there. Awesome. So just looking down the questions, but what I'm actually going to do, rather than, I'm going to come back to a couple of other questions, but what I'm actually going to do is, because the next question I have lined up, actually, someone asked me, was actually answers the question here. They asked me, how do I attract and retain the right team? So in this day and age, it's very difficult to find the right skills. People have a lot more choice around how they move around between companies. Seems to me that a lot of people think they have a lot of choice. So how do you make sure you keep good people? And I always like to make sure we do this based on individual opportunities. So first thing is making sure your company has clear goals, or maybe it's not your company, but maybe your team has clear goals. What do you as a team, function, department want to achieve? Because the number one thing for keeping anyone in any job is purpose. Money is important. I'm sure we've all seen that we want to have a salary, we want to be paid for the work we do, but you need to have a purpose, a drive, a goal, an ambition. So having clarity on your team or department's goals, ideally objectives and key results. If anyone's not done OKRs, it's a great time to clarify those for your team, to say, folks, this is where we're heading. This is what we want to achieve. Because by doing that, you're going to encourage some people to step up, and then you might see some people actually go, this maybe not for me. But either way, you're attracting and keeping the right people because you're aligning them to a goal. And then you need to look at your team and say, have we got the right skills in that team to achieve those goals, those OKRs, the objectives and key results? Because some people may not be in the right role. Over the years, sometimes roles change, companies change, the economy changes. So you need to make sure you have the right team to achieve those goals. And then if you don't, maybe you need to make a change. And I'm not saying maybe it's just a change in the role. Maybe they need to move into a different position. Maybe it's education or training. And at the same time, you can also ask them, what do they want to achieve? What are their career ambitions? Where do they want to go? So if you're asking your team what's most important, that's really important for you, because then you know where you can use your people best. And I always like to do a self-assessment as well. Like do a quick survey with my team to say what's working well for your role, what could be improved. And this is anonymous. So I send it out to my team on a regular basis, ask them what's working well, what we could improve, what they'd like to change. And then when we go through a one-on-one, we'll also ask them about their personal goals. What do they want to achieve? What do they want to work on? Because then sometimes I often get information or details about where they want to go, which I didn't realize. So when someone wants to work more in data, for example, I could say, okay, great, I have this new project spinning up in the future. I'll get you involved in that project. So then you're engaging them in the delivery of your project as well. And then also, I always like to attribute, make sure you attract and retain based on three aspects, which is skills, attributes, and characteristics. So this is important because a lot of our recruiting is based on just their resume, the experience, certifications, etc. But you need to break that down. You need to look at how the people contribute to the role. So you look at the skills, attributes, and characteristics. Skills are their experience, what they've done previously, their certifications, how well they do a job. That's important, but that's number one. Number two would be the attributes. So these are personal qualities. So these are things like adaptability, initiative, drive, sense of humor, or dependability. So attributes, qualities, like how are they as a person? Do they fit in your team? Because again, you want to make sure they're focused and want to move forward to help you achieve your company goals. And then number three is characteristics. So these are habits, consistency, punctuality, teamwork. So characteristics about how they conduct themselves at work. So these are different from attributes. Attributes are more personal. Characteristics are more easy to measure because we're seeing them respond to deadlines at the right time. They're showing up to meetings on time. They're collaborating with their team. They have the habits of always being there at the right time, always delivering on it consistently. So these are easy to manage. So when you're looking at a team, always look at the skills, attributes, and characteristics, and then tie that back to the goals of the company or your team or department. And that's how you attract and retain the right team, because not only are you making it clear for people to come into the team, but you're also making it clear for the people who are already on your team. And then you have clarity yourself around if they're the right people to do the job you need. So hopefully that was helpful. Again, if you want to chat more, feel free to reach out to me. I love this topic because a lot of people don't like recruiting, see it as a hassle and a bit of a drama. I actually quite enjoy recruiting because I've created back to the automation comment earlier, I've created a very standard process for recruiting. So it makes you go much more streamlined, much more quickly, but it also doesn't waste the time of the candidates and doesn't waste my time. And I actually get to meet some really interesting people because I do a lot of pre-screening around questions prior to the interview, and that helps a lot. Much more investment up front, but it makes the process much more enjoyable and productive. Okay, just before we move on to the next question 3, I'm just going to go back to the chat again here just to see what's coming up on this. So let me just go back here. Okay. See another couple of questions come in. 1 second. Okay, awesome. So so the next question is actually related to a couple of comments I've seen come in here as well. So what I'm going to do, let me move on to that. So how do I unblock bottlenecks and streamline the process? So this is all about becoming more efficient, more productive, how to get more time back in my day. So this is a common one. I see this a lot. And this is why I wanted to make sure I answer this question specifically, because a lot of folks ask me this question on a regular basis. So when I think about unblocking bottlenecks, I'm actually going to jump to this middle step here. Let me just zoom in. So this middle step here, this is part of my 9-step technology project accelerator. It actually applies to any project, but what I wanted to do is package up the processes to accelerate and kick off projects in the right way. And when you're thinking about a project that's either in flight and it is accelerating, or you're starting a project for the first time, step number 5 here is probably the most important step. And it's if you're going to start anywhere, and if you want to jump in quickly, jump into number 5. You need to work through all 9 steps, but number 5 is really, really important, the biggest bang for buck. So what I'm going to do, let me just jump back here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly talk through, actually I'll do it this way. I'll talk through how you unblock bottlenecks. So there's a number of steps you go through, and this is all about getting more time back in your day, because I know, myself included, I've had to work through a lot of different practices to figure out how to become more productive, more efficient, and also have less stress in my day as well as I get busier and busier. So the first thing I do with unblocking bottlenecks is we look at the key processes, like what do we work through in our project right now? So remember we talked about automation earlier. So what are the key processes? So be it status reporting, onboarding, decision making, what happens on a repetitive basis? Maybe you're in a testing phase. This is going to change as you go through the project, but look at the key processes and also the technology you're using right now. Is there anything that's manual or being duplicated or repetitive? Because any of those processes, back to the point earlier around automation, is you want to make sure that it's efficient as possible. So starting to create that standard checklist for those processes is the first place to start. A great example is when I was working on one of my project, came into a project that I had to pick up and run, is the reporting was in many different formats. There was a larger team. We had 50 folks on the project, and my team was giving me different reporting formats. One was in Excel, one was in PowerPoint, one was in Word. And then I had to reformat all of that to go up to the steering committee report, which was in a different PowerPoint format. So it sounds pretty obvious. Why do we have all these different report formats? But it's just over time, people have got into habits. And I actually did a post on this the other day about how habits actually create success, but also prevent success, because we are humans, we're habitual people. And so the habits over time had been creating these reports in the different formats. So first thing I did was work with my team to say, let's have one format for the reporting. So it's streamlined all the way up from the individual contributors all the way up to the steering committee. So we had one PowerPoint, one page format for everyone. Again, sounds pretty obvious, but it made such a difference. And once we introduced that, just sped up that process immensely. The next one to look at is decision making. So accountability and decision making are the number one thing on any project, because if you don't have clarity about who owns the decision and who's accountable for the project, then it takes time. There's churn. It takes longer to get to a result. People end up, especially when you're in testing, when you have the high pressure of fixing defects or categorizing defects by severity. Who makes the final decision? If you have 2 or 3 people, it's going to rotate around 2 or 3 people. You need that final decision maker. Same with projects. Ultimately, who's accountable for the project delivery? Who reports to the steering committee? I often see models of 2 in the box or 3 in the box for project management. And I'm not a big fan of that. I don't think it's effective. But where if you absolutely have to have a 2 in the box, where it's sometimes the client lead or company lead along with a vendor, just someone has to be nominated as lead, and that has to be the client or the company lead. The vendor can be closely working with the client lead, but ultimately someone has to have accountability, and that's ultimately the company owner, the project owner in the company. So decision making accountability is absolutely key. The next one, meeting effectiveness. So I think we've all been in meetings where we often ask, why am I here? Why have we gone through this? So I often talk about meetings to say, okay, let's make sure every meeting has an agenda and has notes coming out of it. And then we ask everyone at the beginning, is there anything else to talk about right now? Any other agenda topics? So I don't know how many of you have been into meetings when we go in and we end up talking a lot, touch on the topic, then go down a couple of side roads and different paths, then come back to the main topic and then off to side roads again. An agenda keeps you on track. The other thing is things change between setting up the meeting and then when the meeting actually takes place, especially in projects. Sometimes things happen. Sometimes there's a new issue that's come up. So I always ask at the beginning of any of my meetings, here's the agenda I want to go through. Here are the key points. But is there anything else that we want to talk about today, folks? Is there anything else to bring into this meeting? Because if you're in a steering committee meeting and they want to talk about budget, whereas you wanted to talk about schedule, there's no point talking about schedule because they're not interested. They want to know about the budget. So you just deal with that straight away. If you don't have the information, then you may have to just quickly cut the meeting short. Either way, you have to respond to what they need. Again, going back to that very first slide about adaptability, great example there. And then the last point here is around we talked about standard operating procedures, checklists. So for any project, make sure you have an onboarding checklist or toolkit. So when someone comes into the project new, here's the charter, here's the goals of the project, here's the organization design, the organization chart showing who's who with names as well as roles. So when someone comes into the project new, they know where to go. Here's the links to the folders. Here's the documents you need to look at. Here's the meeting cadence. Here's what meetings you should attend. Also let them know what meetings are happening, even if they don't attend them, to have awareness. Here's the project manager. Here's your point contact. Then they get into the delivery of the role. But an onboarding toolkit or onboarding pack or deck is absolutely vital to any project, because again, it just makes that onboarding new people much, much, much quicker. And that goes into standard operating procedures as well. So in summary, when you're looking at how do you accelerate projects, new projects, build them out, make sure they run faster and more efficiently, there's 9 steps, which I'll go through in another session. But if you're going to look at anything, just look at the bottlenecks and unblocking those, that process. So hopefully that was useful as well. Let me just zoom back here, just a quick look at the chats and the questions coming in here. Okay. Okay, good stuff. I think I've pretty much answered everything that's come in here as well. So much to cover on this topic, actually, folks. And what I'll do is in next Tuesday at 11 o'clock, I'll actually deep dive. There's a couple of themes around the questions here around performance management, productivity. A lot of people ask around productivity. How do I get time back in my day? How do I be more effective on my day? How do I stop having to fight fires all the time? And so I'll dive into that a bit more next week, because technology helps, absolutely. But it's interesting. There was a quote the other day. I was going through one of my training sessions, and it's impossible to manage time. Everyone talks about time management. That actually is not possible. You can't manage time. We haven't invented a time machine. Time proceeds anyway. But what you can do is you can manage self. So it's about self-management. How am I going to manage myself given the time I have available? Which again sounds pretty obvious. But what I'll do next week is I'll actually share some tips and techniques I've used in terms of managing my day and managing myself, so I can get the most out of my time that I have available. Because I often think, how do those successful people achieve so much? Everyone has the same amount of time per day, but yet some people achieve so much more. So what do we learn from that? And I've done a lot of study on this, and I've got a couple of tips. The first pro tip I'll mention right now before we finish up is don't start with emails. Do not start your day at your desk. As soon as you get in there, do not open your laptop, desktop, whatever, and look at emails. Start with planning your day. Then spend at least, making sure you know what you've got to do today and allocate time for it. Then you get into emails, because otherwise, as soon as you get into emails, there's things to fix and you get pulled into other people's agendas. It's important, but not urgent. And I will go into that into a bit more detail next week. Okay, just looking down the chat and the questions coming in here. Okay, I think we're about covered there. So what I'm going to do is let's just move on to that. I'm going to actually because I got this is awesome, folks. Really enjoyed this. Thank you for sharing your questions. I want to make sure we cover more of them next week. I'll, like I said, dive into productivity. But if you want to reach out to me, if you have any questions at all, just drop me a line. John@wedeliveyourvision.com. Always happy to chat, no obligation. Just want to share my learnings over the years. Part of my pay it forward, pay it back mantra at the moment. So that's where we are now. In the meantime, I'd say, thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you again next week at 11 o'clock on Tuesday. Take care. Bye for now.